What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the second commercial mixtape by Lil Yachty. Basically, this album is called Summer Songs 2, and it came out in the summer of 2016. Now, this is a pretty revolutionary project. I can definitely see the edge of this particular project as it helped flesh out particular styles in like 2010s trap as far as that would continue to be throughout the decade. But this is kind of more like not wholesomely for the younger set, but I can kind of see him being kind of like a leader of the new school as far as that kind of went. Just folks like Rich Brian and Post Malone and like Juice World and some of those type folks that were dominant around like the mid late 2010s and stuff. And I can kind of see the centralness about this where I reviewed Lil Yachty's first project, Lil Boat, back in early mid 2020, but I kind of had a decent scope of what to think of that project. But now I definitely see the sight of that particular project being a little bit more revolutionary than I initially thought. I did at least like the song One Night, but I didn't like the second single Minnesota as much, and I kind of didn't think that too much of Elsewise, apart from like the beats that were produced by the Good Perry, were that highlighted as far as that kind of went. But now I still think the Good Perry is a pretty good team up with Lil Yachty, but I would have to say I do see more appreciation for both of these projects, both Lil Boat 1 and Summer Songs 2, as far as these consecutively kind of go. I see the art of this particular style. Like Lil Yachty is pretty artful and creative on this particular project. Maybe not every single song hits as heavily, but he does have some hits on here, and I do think this. I would at least say this is an improvement over Lil Boat and what I thought of it 3.5 years ago. But I'd probably have to go back and see what I thought comparatively to Lil Boat back in like or nowadays just to see how much more I would like, because I would wonder about that. But just to be able to say I do like this project, and I would have to say I know that Lil Yachty is kind of one of the new school cats that catches a lot of flack just because of like the auto tune stuff and because of the auto tune stuff and just not everyone kind of being as accommodated to trap as far as that kind of goes. But I look after the concept. I mean, there is some good stuff on here. I think there's a particular style about it that does have its edge towards it, and there's definitely some good stuff in here to be able to throw around and kind of have. I can see this album being summer songs. This very much is a summer album. I can see that concept. Even if this music is not wholesomely made, if you were like 30 or 32 back in 2016 or something like that, maybe this music isn't wholesomely made in that context. It's somewhat youthful and rambunctious, but I like the concept of it enough to be able to say that it kind of has a good mixture of just appreciating like a younger generation's kind of sound and being able to say that this is like a foothold of that. I kind of feel like when you think of like albums by like millennials or Gen X's that kind of have those particular contexts, like the Marshall Mathers LP is I'm trying to like, thinking of like a Chris Brown album being like a good millennial album and like a Tupac album being like a good Gen X album or something like that. I feel like this is kind of like a footnote of one that's particularly a highlight for like the Gen Z generation as far as that kind of goes. Now I know the backlash and the kind of toss up between what folks think of him nowadays is kind of back and forth, but I do see the quality in this. I do feel like there's some quality here. I think it laid down some groundwork, even if some folks are not wholesomely a fan of like auto tune trap and things like that. I do see the highlight in it, and I'll kind of start to point out some of these as far as that kind of goes to kind of get my point of view from it, so you can see like as to how some of these would work for a pretty hazy kind of summer and milder senses kind of litty, more stepping out kind of moments. But this is very much just like a malaise kind of smoke a few swishers, just kind of kick back in like a hammock kind of summer as far as that kind of is concerned. Just kick back, this pink purple skies, some of those type moments, just enjoying like July, August, September, some of those type moments. And just maybe you're a teenager, maybe you're in college, maybe you're mid 20s, something like that. But I do think folks who are in their early 30s and probably further in some cases could probably not have too much of a problem listening to it, even despite the fact that it's rambunctious. But the thing about this particular project is Wikipedia does have an article about this album, but it doesn't list the single. And I had to go to Lil Yachty's discography to discover that the only music video that was really dropped from this project, which I suppose is the single from it, was Shoot Out the Roof. So that's the only one I could really find. Tried looking in Google and Yahoo and some of those type places to figure out what the singles were from Summer Songs 2, but it just didn't have that information. So I'm just going to assume because the music video was Shoot Out the Roof that was the single release from the project, but there's just really not that much information. But Shoot Out the Roof is kind of a day's dreary late day gem. I would say it's a good dreary hangout cut, and it's definitely a solid smoke a few track. This definitely feels like it's ripped out of like a video game, something like this, a 90s video game, something in that context. I saw a double XL review and they said that they thought it sounded like a Super Mario game or something like that. I just would have to say it definitely has like that kind of Definitely kind of has that hazy and kind of dazed, kind of dreary type feel about it as far as that kind of goes. This really feels like a hangout song. This just really feels like a hangout song for like 3:30, 4:30 p.m. Maybe you're done with class, maybe you're done with work, something like that. Just the initial kind of where it's still sunny out and still somewhat midday as far as that's kind of concerned, but just kind of not so much amidst like the actual productiveness of the day and the work and the responsibilities and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. Just kind of more of like a more recreational one and just kind of like a light kind of boppish kind of hangout sense. I mean, it's kind of rambunctious, but I like the concept about it. It's just kind of one for a good, just rambunctious kind of hangout tune as far as that kind of goes. Just a good bop. So to talk about the 14, so there's 14 songs on this album or mixtape, and out of those 14, I wound up recommending to you 7. So that's actually quite a bit on here. It's more than I want to say I had thought of Lil Bo, even though I'd probably raise the score of that nowadays. But basically, the 7 songs I recommend on here would be Shoot Out the Roof, Dipset, Life Goes On, Yeah, Yeah, Pretty, IDK, which is, obviously I don't know, and For Hot 97. Good bop on here is For Hot 97. This is a litty turned up cut. It's an edgy trap song that isn't as hazy, and it's a bop for being out on the town, I would definitely say. Lil Yachty does kind of have some more jivey kind of up-tempo kind of trap songs on here, but it just doesn't suit him as much on this particular project. I definitely feel like he has some of these malaise kind of dazed kind of summer songs that worked out pretty well, definitely for like some summer kind of tea sipping and Dr. Pepper sipping and that type of stuff. But I kind of look after it like these more kind of turned up trap type tunes. I at least like Hot 97. This is a pretty good bop for just kind of hanging out, getting ready to step out, go to like some shindig, something like that. I mean, I know that Lil Yachty was not quite 21. So as far as like it being a nightclub or something that's not as quite, it doesn't ring true as much, but it's just kind of good for like a hangout session where maybe you're just going to like a house party or something like that, just more in like a trap sense. So it's just kind of more localized, I would say. It just feels more residential compared to some of the stuff that Lil Yachty would do later. But it's a good bop for just kind of like a more house party kind of feel as far as getting ready to get turned up in like a rambunctious kind of sense. But it's a good one. A song that I was pretty surprised by on here that's a good highlight is Life Goes On. This is like some late day makeshift rap, I would say. It's malaise ruminating and it has good character and a dreary beat. So this is definitely one where it just kind of feels like if Tupac would have been 18, 19 back in 2016 or something like that, I'd say this might have been a song that he might have done around that time. It just kind of has that rambunctious kind of feel about it, but also ruminating in like a more fit for 2010s and teenage 2010s kind of sense as far as that kind of goes. But this is kind of a makeshift kind of rap kind of song. It's malaise and kind of straightforward, almost blue collar, but this is kind of more just kind of typical vanilla in terms of like just kind of more typical sounding and just like a makeshift kind of sense. That's a good bop for that one. Just has a pretty dreary kind of beat that's definitely pretty enjoyable on here. It's a nice one. Real nice highlight on here is Dipset, which has Offset from Migos on here. This has a really good sample on here, a really good plush sample on this particular song. It's a sleepy kind of smoke a few cut, and it's good for some lazy AM after hours haze. So this is just good for like being at a buddy's house, watching, playing PlayStation, watching movies, that type of stuff, smoking several swishers as far as that kind of goes. It's good in that sort of hangout kind of sense. Definitely like the sample on the songs. It's very plush and just melodic as far as that kind of goes. I've heard this sample before. I just can't think of exactly where, but it definitely works. It's good to finally see this kind of sample get played as far as that kind of goes because it just feels fitting for like a rap song. So it does feel like something that Dipset and Joel Santana and Cameron and Jim Jones and Freaky Zeke would kind of do and such, something in that context with their sampling. It's just kind of one. There probably needed to be more beats like this particular song on this particular album. It just didn't quite happen as much, but it is a good sleepy kind of one that just feels very dreary but plush just in the sense of how it goes. It's very kind of smooth, butter smooth kind of one. Yeah, yeah, is a good day after hours jam. This is a sluggish Spotify-like tune, and it's a good vanilla hangout fare for some 2010s rap. This is definitely one where the relevancy factor is pretty high on here. This is something that feels like a typical kind of session for like some streaming services and Spotify-like tunes as far as that kind of goes. I definitely like the highlighted feel. This has a lot of good kind of ambience about it. It's just pretty lazy and malaise. Definitely feels like a summer tune as far as that kind of goes. And maybe not so much smoke a few type tune like some of these other ones on here, but it's just kind of more of like hangout fare as far as that kind of goes. Tied down kind of fair ladies around that sort of concept as far as that kind of goes. It's a good highlight for that sort of concept. And it's just pretty much like these are just like factory made. It's interesting. I mean, these are the sorts of songs that dominated Spotify throughout the mid late 2010s and things like that. It's like so many of these got like millions and millions of plays as far as that kind of goes. So this is just kind of a vanilla and factory kind of one, but it's somewhat new when I think of songs, you know, previously dominant, this is kind of one that was kind of trendy for 2016 as far as it kind of went. Just some of those ones in that sort of concept. But another one that's like it is Pretty. This is a good companion to Yeah Yeah. It's kind of a dreary Spotify lo-fi hangout song, and it's a chill kind of smoke a few tune, I would say. It's a chill kind of smoke a joint kind of tune. So this is definitely a good one. I definitely feel like Pretty is more of like a smoke ready tune compared to Yeah Yeah, but both of these are pretty much like Spotify, just meant for just lazy kind of nights of streaming as far as that kind of goes. Just wind down kind of music and just kick back and just kind of some of those type fanfares as far as that kind of goes. Definitely like the concept about it. But another one that's kind of like that, just in a more kind of peppy sense, is IDK. And this one's kind of a midday hangout haze, I would say. It's kind of some makeshift commerce trap, I would say. IDK is kind of a midday hangout haze, I would say. It's some makeshift commerce trap, and it has regular, almost lazy day kind of feels about it, but it's pretty straightforward. So this is definitely one. It's kind of like some of the stuff that you think about on a lot of this stuff on this album, like Life Goes On and Yeah, Yeah, and Shoot Out the Roof, and some of those type moments that are just kind of more hangout like, but just kind of in a more kind of regular and straightforward kind of sense. This is actually kind of a vanilla 2010s rap kind of album. I feel like when it comes to trap music and 2010s rap and some of that type of stuff, I feel like this is pretty vanilla, just as straightforward as it is, and just regular day kind of feels, where these are not quite as edgy as some of the sheer trap albums that you found and like 21 Savage and folks like that, Migos and some of those type folks, or Future, when some of these folks get really turned up. This is just pretty, like when he says summer songs, the concept about it is these are lazy kind of summer days. These are not like barbecue, loud, raging kind of festivity kind of moments, but these are just kind of more kind of malaise, kind of just looking at sunsets kind of moments as far as that kind of goes. But I do like the concept about it. I feel like minus like songs like 4 Hot 97 and Up Next 3, most of this is pretty just got a good concept of how to do it. It's just very much regular and vanilla. I think that's kind of the concept about it. I would think more so than I thought before that this is kind of one that's more stock and just like a front runner for like 20, you know, mid 2010s and late 2010s kind of fare as far as rap music, especially from like a Rookie and kind of more new school kind of sense as far as that kind of goes. So this is pretty good for that. I look at that concept. But yeah, so that basically takes care of it. So to talk about the songs on here that I didn't enjoy, which would just be about 7 or 8 songs, me liking 7 songs on here. So some of these 7, like some of these ones like King of Teens and like the Y interlude and intro First Day of Summer just didn't quite have as catchy of productions and were not quite as affable in terms of what they needed to be. I mean, some of these really had like that Lay's kind of hazy kind of feel about them, but they just were not quite as affable and quite as catchy overall as like songs like Shoot Out the Roof and IDK and Yeah Yeah and Life Goes On, some of those type ones. There's just better productions on here than others, and some of these just kind of are not quite as compelling as far as that kind of goes. But the tail end of the album kind of had that same problem where I feel like songs like Such Ease, All In, and So Many People just didn't quite have as much captivatingness about them. Yeah, some of these other ones like there were kind of some poor beats on here that just did not really have like a good jump off the page and kind of attractive kind of persona as far as how they kind of went. I feel like Such Ease pretty much had a pretty bunk and terrible beat here. All In and some of those other ones. Songs like All In and So Many People were kind of in the same boat, just not quite having the captivation that they needed. I mean, there's just definitely songs that are better than others on here, where some of these are just kind of ones that just kind of feel like worse than filler, and this pretty much shouldn't have been on the project. They just really bogged down the project. And then I would have to say that Up Next 3 was kind of another disappointing one. This was kind of an up-tempo song that was trying to be on the same page as 4 Hot 97, but the production on there just did not quite compare as well. And I kind of would have to say, I think Lil Yachty had some of these songs like One Night in Minnesota, and some of these songs on this album like Life Goes On and Dipset and Shoot Out the Roof really nailed down. He definitely has a niche in a particular style that works pretty heavily, but some of these up-tempo moments as we start to, it's kind of weird when you don't like up-tempo songs from an artist, just because it's kind of a strange atmosphere that most of the time he kind of has like a more lazy and almost kind of druggy, dreary kind of feel about it. But some of these snappier kind of moments for stepping out just didn't work quite as well. And this was kind of seen. So it's kind of, I mean, it was kind of half and half. I liked 4 Hot 97, didn't like Up Next 3, but there just weren't a ton of those moments really on here. Really, for the most part, Lil Yachty's pretty just laid back and kind of chill on this particular album. It's just too bad that we didn't get to see more moments where there could have been more turned up kind of vibes, because he could have used like a nightclub and stepping out kind of get crazy kind of moment more. But yeah, to talk about what I'm going to score this out, me liking 7 songs out of 14 on here, I'm going to go ahead and give So what I'm going to score this out, me liking 7 songs out of 14 or 13, because the Y interlude is not really a song, but 7 songs out of 13 or 14 on here. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 6 out of 10. I think I'm going to give it a 6. I know that I liked exactly half the songs on here, but I'm giving it a higher score just because it laid the groundwork and it did some revolutionary things. I feel like it just did a lot of groundwork as far as that kind of went, that just actually hit some bases and nailed them pretty well. There just weren't a ton of albums like this at the time, and it definitely covered some bases that were interesting to see. And I feel like for new school stuff that I haven't really paid a ton of attention to, this is actually a pretty good highlight for stuff for 2016 for it. It works for some pretty hazy summer music and kind of decent makeshift kind of after hours for just got done with class or work or something like that. Just good hangout songs and good kind of hang out with your buddies type songs, just in a residential sense. Maybe it doesn't have a ton of nightclub songs, but it does have some good kind of just lazy kind of summer evening kind of feels about it that work pretty well. In terms of the social score, I'm going to give the social score like a 6.5 out of 10 because I feel like there are some good moments on here, but the promotion was just very scant and minimal. I don't know why Lil Yachty didn't put out a music video or something like that, apart from Shoot Out the Roof. And for the most part, it's just barely even known that there was promotion for this project. So it just was kind of pretty straightforward, just kind of happened, and that was about it. You just kind of had to know more so about it to really get towards it. That's just kind of the thing. So I look after it, 6.5. I mean, there are some moments on here. There are plenty of good smoke sessions, plenty of good summer malaise kind of sessions for just like some simmering kind of days as far as that's kind of concerned. But there are some other summer moments on here, but they don't quite connect as much. This is kind of somewhat of a patchy project in terms of just like the overall kind of ones. There just are some beats and overall song executions that are better than others when it comes to that. So it's just something to keep in mind. But in terms of the future, like Lil Yachty dropped an album at the beginning of this year called like Let's Start Here or something like that, and he's working on more stuff. I know he put out a song with J. Cole recently, so I don't know what he's up to nowadays, but we're gonna have to see some more of these. But this is actually a pretty rock solid and straightforward kind of project. Despite the fact that I gave it a 6, it is a pretty important project for like new school type stuff. If you're younger than like 28 or 27 or something like that, you just are more kind of amidst like the newer times and you're not familiar with like Tupac and Ice Cube and in some cases Nelly or Chameleonaire and people like that. You just need someone more relevant, more with the times TikTok kind of music. I would definitely say this is a pretty important album and did its damage. So that's definitely kind of the thing here.